What's going on? What's going on, team? Welcome back to another week. Welcome back to another weekly stock talk. If you guys are a part of the team, we do these videos every single week. We give the team an update. If you guys are just tuning in from YouTube, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like this video if you find any value. What we do in these weekly stock talks is we talk about the overall market, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, and then we talk about some of the stocks and opportunities that we are paying attention to for this week. So with the market moving quite dramatically lately, we saw a massive push to the upside in the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq as soon as those rates were hiked on Wednesday of last week. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the Nasdaq. We're going to talk about where it's at from a technical standpoint. We'll also take a look at the S&P 500, and then we're going to jump into talking about the opportunities, one of which is Facebook, which is a stock that we've been paying attention to try to capitalize on that upside recovery in the next week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks to potentially a month. However, it's one of the blue chip names that we are very bullish on for this recovery. So we're going to make this real quick. We're going to jump into the NASDAQ. The first thing that we're currently seeing the level that we're at is 14,314, which is actually a resistance level right here. So let's go ahead and zoom in just enough to see the all-time highs and where we're currently at. So those all-time highs were 16,767. We're currently at 14,318, which is actually aligning with this red line right here, which is actually a resistance level, right? So we saw this act as a resistance when we came down to this level. We found support, we came up, we had a hard time breaking up, so we consolidated, and then we finally broke up. And then once we broke below it again, we ended up seeing this act as a resistance again, the same red level, the same red line. So we're currently at that level again. And the bullish thing that we do see is we did finally break above this 180-day moving average, which is this green line, which we haven't basically seen since January. Ever since we broke below it in January, we haven't seen it break above. So this is a bullish sign for us. We definitely have tremendous amount of profit potential if we do begin to recover. So measuring the profit potential, you can see that we're looking at about 15.8% profit potential just in the NASDAQ. So breaking above is definitely a bullish sign. However, we are looking like we're having a hard time breaking above this resistance level. So ideally we want to look at the RSI, which is the relative strength index, and we also want to look at the MACD. We can see that the MACD, we're finally getting a cross signal to the downside, that we're actually losing momentum, right? And it looks like we are struggling to break above that resistance. And so it looks like we might be starting to pull back a little bit. The RSI is also quite overextended and it's very overbought. So I wouldn't be surprised to see us pull back a little bit. If you guys are a part of the team, you guys know that we've been watching and building a position on Facebook. So we were able to take advantage of this recovery that happened right here when the overall market pushed up. However, right now, the fact that we're seeing this to be so overbought and so overextended, might be a good time to lock in some of those profits or size down a little bit on all of those positions that, correlate with the NASDAQ and correlate with the S&P 500, or completely exit, wait for that pullback to happen, and then re-enter at a lower price. So we do want to talk about this, though. What we're potentially expecting to see happen is the fact that not only are we going to pull back, ideally we want to see a pullback at least down to this 13,909 level, 13,900 level. The reason being is it would be a confirmation of that 180-day moving average. So if we pull back to this level, we find support, and then we continue higher, not only are we going to relieve some of that stress and some of that pressure that we're seeing on the RSI, and we'll see a little bit of a lower level, giving us more opportunity, more room to push higher, but we'll also see that pullback confirmation, which means that we broke above, we pulled back, we found support, and then we're going to continue higher. And that's just more of a support for us to know that, hey, we're actually starting this reversal and we're starting to see support as the price is beginning to go up. So I see this mistake happen a lot, is a lot of people, they'll see the market pushing higher and they'll jump in and they'll happen to be just around this area. And then as soon as they get in, they'll have that market pullback, and then they're going to get discouraged because they're going to be like, oh, snap, I got in at the wrong time. So just know this is what to expect. If you're not involved already, I would give it some time, wait for that pullback to happen. And then ideally that would be the time for you to consider taking a position on any of the stocks that you're looking at or any of the stocks that we're going to be talking about today. So that's basically what's happening with the Nasdaq. Taking a look at the SPY, which is the S&P 500. We're basically seeing almost the exact same thing. I would say that, obviously you can see that just from this this chart, you can see the fact that, we pulled back below the 180-day moving average, just like we saw in the previous one. And we've been basically below it this entire time. We broke above it, same story, right? So basically everything that we just talked about applies to this as well. Ideally, once again, we do want to see a pullback happen to approximately 435, potentially maybe 430 even, and then a bounce at that level. However, I wouldn't be super bullish right now because we did see quite a bit of a run up. We saw a push of about, 6.66% in just the last week or so. And so when usually the market pushes that high, nothing keeps going on forever. There's always has to be some sort of pullback, some sort of correction before there's a continuation. So just expect a little bit of a pullback in both of those. And the names that we're going to be talking about, everything that we just talked about is going to apply to those names as well. So whether it's going to be Facebook, whether it's going to be Microsoft, whether it's going to be Nvda, Tesla, AMD, or the inverse ETFs that we're going to discuss today, that's going to apply to all of those, right? So take in what you just heard and apply that to the names that we're going to be talking about. So ideally, like I said, we do want to see a pullback. We want to see the RSI drop to around 50 or lower, ideally, which might be, 430 level. And that will give us enough room to continue that bullish continuation, right? There's a lot of speculation as to, is this a bull trap or is this a bear trap? And it, at the end of the day, the way we trade and the way that, I train everybody that's in the academy is don't speculate as much. I mean, obviously there's some sort of speculation that you're going to be doing, but don't rely your entire trading strategy on speculation, right? Because, it's hard to predict, especially in the current economic environment that we're in. It's hard to predict what's going to happen a month from now, right? Because things change so quickly, especially right now. So why we trade off of technicals is because numbers never lie and the charts will never lie to you, right? And so if you're trading off of, just the charts and the rules that we have established in the strategy, it's going to be very, very simple for you to know when to take profit, when to enter, and when to exit, right? So if we do break above this or below this 180 or below this 4-hour EMA, that's definitely going to be a strong exit signal for everybody, right? Just because we're going to continue to see that pullback happen. And so that applies to anything that you're trading in essence. So that's basically what's happening with those two big charts. The two things that I want to talk about today is going to be TQQQ. So that is, these are the two that I'm going to talk about is TQQQ and SQQQ. So they're inverse ETFs, right? So when the overall market's pushing up, TQQQ is going to push up as well. So just like you saw, we saw that pullback happening and we saw the market pushing and we saw TQQQ continue to push as well. And then if you look at SQQQ, you're going to see that. Let's go ahead and actually add another chart here real quick. So this is TQQQ, right? Let's go ahead and get rid of this news, show you SQQQ. So you can see that, put that on the 4-hour. So you can see that, when TQQQ pushes up, SQQQ pushes down, right? So that's what we've been seeing. TQQQ pushing up, SQQQ was pushing down. And so now we're seeing the fact that we're seeing that potential resistance that we were talking about in those previous two charts, the Nasdaq and the S&P 500, we can expect a potential pullback to happen, right? And so if you aren't very comfortable with shorting or, either shorting or waiting for that dip to buy the dip, then you can take advantage of the SQQQ and TQQQ inverse ETFs, right? So what's basically we're seeing that, we'll potentially see a pullback, right? So what we're going to be looking at is obviously both of them. But if we're considering that the market's going to have some sort of correction or some sort of pullback, we can expect that, TQQQ is very overbought and we're potentially going to start seeing a pullback, which is going to start dropping, right? So instead of shorting stocks, how do you take advantage of the market pullback and make money as something else goes up? And that would be SQQQ, right? So we see that, even though TQQQ is super overbought, we see that SQQQ is very oversold, and we're potentially starting to curl and curve up to the upside, which indicates that if the market does pull back, we're potentially going to make, another 15-20% move here on SQQQ as the market pulls back, finds support, and ideally finds that pullback confirmation that we were talking about, right? So you can either wait and get into the dip, or you can take advantage of the market as it's pulling back and make money on the upside trading an ETF, inverse ETF, or you can short. So there's multiple options. There's a lot of ways that you can take advantage of the pullback that's going to be happening. So those are the two that we wanted to talk about as well. As I said, this one's super overbought and it aligns with /NQ and SPY. So this one I would expect to pull back on. SQQQ, as you saw, we were fairly oversold, right? Meaning that we have a great opportunity. So if the market continues to pull back, we'll probably see a push to the upside here on SQQQ. We're also here aligned with the zero, basically the mean line, which is usually tends to act as a support, just like the standard deviation lines. However, the RSI as well, we're in oversold territory. It would make sense that we would have a pullback or a correction on the overall market, and the Nasdaq's looking, and the Msft is looking very, very good as well. So SQQQ out of the two, that's the one we're going to be paying attention to, and I will be paying attention to myself this week. And then the stocks that we wanted to talk about is going to be Facebook. So with all of these stocks that I'm going to be talking about, if you guys aren't in them already, I would strongly encourage you to stay patient, wait for that pullback to happen before jumping into them. But these are definitely names that are very interesting to me, and I think that you should pay attention to as well as the market begins to recover. So Facebook, this is the stock that we've been averaging in as we were bottomed out here. And the main reason is because on the daily chart, if you go back to the previous video from a previous week that we talked about Facebook, you can see that there's a massive gap here between 320 and basically 243. We haven't even reached that 244, 243 level yet. However, because the overall market's overbought, we're anticipating a bit of a correction and a bit of a pullback. We're obviously we've broken above the EMA on the daily, we've broken above the SMA on the 4-hour chart. However, whether and this is where it comes down to trading technically versus being speculative. If you're very patient and you're investing in this for a long period of time, then yeah, you can definitely jump in at any point at this point, and you're almost guaranteed to make money if you hold it for at least a year. But at the end of the day, when we trade technically, we can see that we are overbought, right? So when we were jumping in and we were sizing in as this ticker was close to that 180, 190 level, we are now able to exit at this 211, 215 level when we are very, very overbought, right? And so because we're overbought, we're, sizing out, we're potentially taking profit. To each their own, right? Everybody can take advantage of how they want to play this. However, that's personally what I'm doing, sizing out and taking profit on some of that position. And we're seeing resistance here at the 180-day moving average. So those are signs for us to consider that, hey, it's time for us to take profit. And so, like I said, we're definitely going to see a correction, and I believe that we should see one probably till like 195, 190, 195. At the very least, for us to be, if the market continues to push to the upside, for us to see that support validated and then continuation to the upside. But Facebook is one of the names that we're paying attention to because of that gap. We do have a strong theory and a strong, thesis that we are going to be filling that gap, because gaps do tend to get filled. So Facebook is one of the names that we're watching. We're watching for that pullback to happen, to validate the overall market, to find support on that 180-day moving average that we saw, which would probably align, like I said, with 190, 195 levels here on Facebook approximately. So if you're not in it, I would wait for us to validate that support, find that bottom, when we do see that pullback, and that would be the entry. Right now, jumping in is when personally I'm taking profit. So I wouldn't suggest that it's probably the best time for you to be jumping in if you're not already in Facebook at those lower levels. The next name that we're going to be watching is Msft. So Microsoft, this is another name, once again, similar to Facebook. We're playing all of these names for the next basically month when we see that massive recovery. And so once again, we did break above the 180-day moving average, but because the overall market's so overbought, we do anticipate a pullback probably to around 280, I would say. So another maybe $10, actually $10, $15 of a pullback. I would anticipate maybe 2-3%. And that's where I'd be looking for a potential entry. And it could go as low as 280 actually, because that would be the support that we've been holding. However, I don't anticipate that we're going to drop that low. And I would say, you know, that if we do hold above that 180-day moving average, which is 295, then that just validates it already. And that would be a great entry point. But the profit potential here on this one is about 15.85%. We never showed you what the Facebook profit potential was. That profit potential to pre-earnings, before we had that drop on earnings, we have a profit potential on this one of 60%. And then the next name that we're also taking a look at is going to be Nvda. So this one, again, we're all of these are in a very similar setup. Just because they align so well with the overall market. Again, we broke above the 180-day moving average, just like we did on the Nasdaq and just like we did on the SPY, but we are super overbought. So again, anticipating that pullback confirmation of about probably 10% on Nvda. Not the greatest time to be getting in, but definitely a great time to be preparing to get in once we see that pullback, validation, and then a continuation. And so ideally, we don't want to break below this level right here at 234. 234 is where we want to find support. That's where we're going to be looking to enter into this name, Nvda. Same thing with AMD, very similar setup. And these kind of go hand in hand with one another. Not as much broken up above the 180-day as Nvidia, but, you know, profit potential wise, we're looking at about 41% on AMD. Same thing. We're not super overbought here on AMD like we are on Nvidia, but it's probably going to react just the same way. So if we do see the overall market pulling back, this is going to pull back as well. I'd be looking for 107. That's where I'd be looking for a potential entry if we do validate and find support on the overall market for a recovery. It's too early to tell completely, but I do anticipate that we've basically found more or less the bottom of that pullback. That last 2 months that we've been seeing the overall market pulling back, I do believe that we have come very close to that bottom. And I do personally, this is not financial advice, but personally, I believe that we have found that bottom, and that I do anticipate to see all of these names begin to recover after we get that pullback confirmation. That pullback confirmation is key, right? And so that's why we're talking about these names. That way you guys can get prepared. And instead of jumping into speculative names or high risk names, these are all very strong companies that have a great risk to reward ratio. They have great profit potential, and they're very stable, right? So the risk isn't as high. And the last name that we're obviously going to talk about is going to be Tesla. So Tesla, same thing. We saw break above the 180-day moving average. We do want to see that pullback. So in my opinion, we're looking at about 838 is where I do want to see this pull back to 838, 845. Ideally, see that pullback. That's going to relieve some of that pressure on the RSI, and the MACD is going to level out, come back, give us an opportunity for a curve to the upside. And then ideally, we see that profit potential of about 38%. So those are the names that we are watching, not only for this week, but for the next month, basically, as we see this recovery playing out. I do think that, you know, the market has adjusted for the most part to kind of what's going on in the world right now. You know, we've been experiencing the Ukraine-Russia tensions. We've had the sanctions kick in. We've had the rate hikes happen. We've had the inflation numbers happen. And so the market is more or less, you know, adapted to what's going on right now. And so I think that 2 months that we've been seeing this pullback happening, I think that we've come to, you know, a fairly stable point where looking at the overall market, you can say that, you know, there's always downside potential, right? You can't, if anybody's telling you that they know something for certain. They're already lying to you. But there's always more downside potential. But in my opinion, that 410 level that we've experienced, we've tested it 3 times, and we found strong support at those levels. And we've just broken above the 180-day moving average. In my opinion, I believe that if we aren't starting to see that recovery right now, or in the next week or two, we wouldn't have broken above this level, right? We wouldn't have broken above the moving average. We would have just gotten rejected by it, as we have been over the last 2 months. And so since we did break above it, I do have this thesis that we are going to come down. We're going to validate this level at 434, 430, find support, relieve the RSI, relieve the MACD, and give us another push to the upside right after that. So hopefully you guys found some value in this video, and found some names to watch for and prepare. And so make sure to wait for that pullback confirmation. And if you guys have any questions or have any stocks or tickers that you guys are watching that I didn't mention in this video, make sure to throw them in the comments down below. Smash that like button if you guys did find value, and share this video with a friend. And I'll see you guys on next week's Stock Talk video.